Hello and welcome back to Keep Creative in Conversation. I'm joined once again by Lydia. Hi Lydia, how are you doing today?
Hello, I'm good, thanks.
And we're going to catch up again with all the kind of weekly changes in sustainable fashion and what the headlines are, what topics you've pulled out from those headlines. We've got three things to talk about today. The first is updates to EU Waste Framework Directive. The second is Reskinned and Act UK's textile waste trial. And the third one, and quite importantly, is LOOM, which is the new Upcycling App. Straight to it, Lydia, and we're going to talk about the first one. Tell us a little bit more about the updates to the EU Waste Framework Directive.
Okay, so last week was quite an insightful week when we talk about textile waste, because actually the EU Council and Parliament reached a provisional agreement, which it's very important to know that this is still not confirmed. So we've still got quite a long way to go. But it's basically about a provisional agreement about managing and mitigating the volume of textile waste that we're seeing in the EU. And it's very much around this kind of concept of the polluter pays. So I've been talking a lot about EPR, which is extended producer responsibility, the last few weeks. But this is very much about where the brand or the producer will ultimately have to contribute towards the cost of collecting, sorting and recycling textile waste.
Oh, wow. Okay. And do you reckon these new rules will drive real industry action, or do you think brands will find loopholes in it?
So as I say, we've still got a long way to go, because once it's actually been formally adopted, there's still kind of a time period that the EU member states will kind of need to go to kind of actually implement these. But I think what we're going to see is it's really kind of getting that conversation out there and making brands more aware. And actually what it's going to do is it's going to put real pressure on kind of brands and producers to actually develop more sort of circular and sustainable products in the first place. So, ones that are going to last longer, they're going to be easier to be repaired and easier to recycle, because ultimately there's going to be a cost associated with the kind of disposal of those products. So it's about really kind of trying to encourage brands to produce better things in the first place, and really think about kind of the end of life of a product at the beginning of life when they're actually designing product. And that's really, really different, because ultimately up until now the industry's been largely kind of unregulated. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting from that point of view.
So, second topic is Reskinned and Act UK's textile waste trial. Tell us a little bit more about what that is. Who are Reskinned?
So Reskinned are a circular business model who work with leading brands in the UK on take-back schemes. And what they're really focused on is getting kind of unloved, unused garments back out there in circulation in the industry. So they work on many take-back schemes, but they're also combined with over 20 years of textile recycling. So what they're doing now is they're really working with leading organisations such as ACT UK and the UK Fashion and Textile Association on how to actually really manage textile waste which is generated in the UK. Every year in the UK, we generate over 1 million tonnes worth of post-consumer textiles, and about a third of that is actually non-wearable and normally just kind of ends up in kind of landfill or incineration. So what's really interesting about this particular initiative is it's very much about kind of customer facing. So where we talk a lot about kind of the industry and the challenge of overproduction, this is actually thinking about consumers and overconsumption, and actually what consumers kind of deem unwearable and textile waste, and how we kind of almost get that out of household rubbish bins and actually into textile waste streams, and so that it can actually become kind of feedstock for the industry in terms of textile recycling.
Yeah, and there's loads you've just mentioned in there. And one of the questions I have for you is, do you think collaborations like this are really needed to make, I guess, circularity in fashion truly scalable?
So I think what's interesting here is, you've got some real leading brands behind this. So you've got Marks and Spencers, you've got Tesco, huge players in terms of the UK market. You've got the Salvation Army, a whole host of kind of other players. In the UK, we haven't actually got this EPR policy in place yet. So, this is very much kind of voluntary scheme. But I think seeing those big businesses really starting to work together and engage those conversations, and especially engaging in kind of consumer behaviour, and starting to understand, okay, what do we actually need to put in place to manage textile waste? It will come in time, and so actually starting to do these trials and starting to sort of get that infrastructure in place and starting to understand what needs to happen is really important, because it takes a long time to implement and adopt these things. So the sooner we can start, the more we can learn now and start to implement it.
And the third headline we're going to talk about out of Lydia's weekly breakdown, latest with Lydia, is LOOM, the new upcycling app, developed and founded by Daisy Harvey. Tell us a little bit more about LOOM. This sounds really interesting, this one.
So this is really interesting because actually I've been following and connected with Daisy over the last sort of 2.5 years. So I've actually seen this right from the first instance when it was just an idea. Actually to see it launch this week and to see it come to life, to see it featured in Vogue, to see it featured in a lot of the kind of industry news is really, really exciting. So basically what this is about is it's an app where consumers can take their existing wardrobe and they can upcycle it and transform it into a new garment. So, we see all these crazy stats about, there's enough clothes on the planet to dress the next 6 generations. So what this is about is actually repurposing, what we already own, almost like a kind of bespoke design service. What's really interesting is we're seeing this kind of new consumer, they want to be shop sustainable, they want to be more sustainable with their purchases, but they also, they want to be creative and they want to be unique in their own style. And what Daisy is building here is something that combines kind of both of those aspects. Feels really exciting, and it's still very much kind of at ground level, but looking at kind of emerging business models and how consumer behavior is changing, I think it's definitely one for us to watch.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. What I love hearing there is, creativity is always about problem solving. That's really what being creative is about in a lot of different sectors of the market. So is this the start of a creative and circular retail revolution, perhaps?
I think it's just really interesting, where brands really need to think about the waste that they generate as a business, and this kind of new way of thinking. It's about taking that waste or taking those products that could essentially just get binned and end up in landfill and transforming them into something new. It's about supporting it, like latest designers, the whole kind of community of designers that we've got as well. And essentially it's about taking something that was potentially quite niche in terms of upcycling and actually making it mainstream, which is quite revolutionary. And I think, if you look back a few years ago when we started as an industry talking about renting, not just from an occasion wear, but from, everyday items, and, people thought, well, that's never going to catch on. And, you're seeing it now, you're seeing it, lots of brands are offering a rental model as part of their business model. I think it's just really interesting to keep your eyes and ears to the ground and understand what these emerging business models look like.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's a decade of change, a decade of creative innovation. And let's support Loom and Daisy and everything that she's doing. That sounds amazing. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Lydia. And thanks again for the roundup. That's it for this week. The 3 top headlines out of your newsletter. Obviously, you can follow Lydia on everything she's doing on LinkedIn and across her social media. And I'll share all the details of her profile as well for the viewers. But thanks again, Lydia, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. See you next week.